Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Tomorrow, thousands of activists will descend on Washington to demand that you be punished for crimes that others committed. It's called the March for Our Lives, and it's designed to lobby for new gun control legislation across the country. The event is backed by wealthy and powerful people, billionaire Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, many others. Some of what they're calling for is unconstitutional and irrational. It cannot work, it won't work, and that's why it's not already the law. It's not just NRA lobbying, it's common sense. But the organizers would rather not get into all those details, and they certainly don't want to have all those debates, and that's why they're hiding behind the victims of the latest horrific school shooting. The kids are front and center by design. A handful of teens from Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. Now, they have a right to their views, obviously. That is a given. This is one of the rare shows that supports the rights of people we disagree with to talk. But the rest of us also have rights, including the right to assess what they're saying and decide whether it ought to become law to which we are subject. These are not religious figures. We're not the faithful. We're all citizens here. So let's take a look at what they're saying and decide if it's a good idea or not. For example, here's David Hogg. He's a Stoneman Douglas student. You may have seen him on television. He's dutifully trotted out by the media as a gun expert. Here's part of his take.
The way Rick Scott has been talking about it is like, when the shooter arrives, we need a metal detector and a guard.
Point, with Rick Scott, it's like, when I get elected to Senate, we're not going to let that happen. What sick are out there that want to continue to sell more guns, murder more children, and honestly just get reelected? What type of person are you when you want to see more money than children's lives? What type of person does that?
We have to use our white privilege now to make sure that all of the voices that have, all of the people that have died as a result of this and haven't been covered the same can now be heard.
Sell more guns, murder more children, and get reelected. That is David Hogg's view of the other side of the debate. Emma Gonzalez, meanwhile, another celebrated survivor of the shooting, basically agrees with that. She recently said in a speech, quote, "I don't really care what people who defend the Second Amendment have to say." Let's take this seriously. We should take it seriously because it's serious. If you honestly don't care what the people who disagree with you think, if you believe they want to, quote, murder more children, then who are you? Well, you're angry. You're definitely not fit to be making policy for the rest of us. You are, by definition, an extremist. You should not have power if you really believe anyone who disagrees with you is evil and wants to kill the innocent. Maybe a journalist could point that out, but no. Journalists agree with Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg, so they've slapped them on the cover of Time magazine and declared that they're heroes, and you're not allowed to disagree with them. Here's more David Hogg from earlier today, by the way, explaining that the Bill of Rights matters when it applies to what he can wear to school. Watch.
After we come back from spring break, they're requiring all of us to have clear backpacks. It's unnecessary, it's embarrassing for a lot of the students, and it makes them feel isolated and separated from the rest of American school culture, where they're having essentially their First Amendment rights infringed upon because they can't freely wear whatever backpack they want.
So controlling your backpack abridges your First Amendment rights because the First Amendment applies to backpacks, but the Second Amendment does not apply to firearms. How does that work exactly? Wait, you say, why are you picking on David Hogg? He's only a kid. He shouldn't be held to adult standards of reasoning or be expected to think critically about the consequences of what he espouses. Well, yeah, exactly. He's a kid. He's just been through unspeakable tragedy. And that's why adults shouldn't be using him or his friends to push their agendas on the rest of us. Mark Glaze is co-founder of Guns Down, a gun control group, and he joins us now. So this is the problem that I have, is that if you sincerely believe that people who disagree with you want to kill children, then you shouldn't be involved in making policy, because that's exactly what we don't need more of, it seems to me. Why is he being pushed to the front of this movement?
Well, look, I think you ought to cut this kid a little bit of slack. You know, he was at school when 17 of his friends were killed the other day. Not everything he says should be taken as, you know, gospel from the gun violence prevention community about what we ought to be doing about guns.
Well, I just conceded that in my script because I agree with that this is a kid who just saw unspeakable tragedy. He saw his classmates killed, and that's exactly why he shouldn't be involved in formulating a response to it.
Yeah, but
because he's a kid. So you can't simultaneously argue that you need to shut up and listen to him, and if you don't, you're bad, which is what the left is arguing, and that we shouldn't take what he says seriously or literally. We have to kind of choose one, and I'm kind of happy to choose the first one.
You know, I think these kids are doing what citizens ought to do. They had a terrible experience, and they're trying to do something about it. Basically, what they're saying is the same thing that 70% of the public is out there saying, which is what we're doing with guns right now isn't working. We ought to have stricter gun laws. Now, let's have a conversation about what those gun laws should look like. I think there's a lot right with that.
But you don't see that what the left is doing doing is short-circuiting honest conversations. I, for example, have tried every night since that shooting, almost every single night, to get a leader of a gun control group on. You're the only one who comes, the only one. No one else will come. I know a lot about guns. I'm interested in the topic. No one wants to have the debate. Instead, they throw David Hogg in your face and say, be quiet, and then allow David Hogg to, uninterrupted, impugn the character of anyone who disagrees with him. It's demagoguery. That's not how adults behave.
Yeah, but it's also not fair to pull one comment out of one interview out of the.
All right, I'll pull another one. Here's an idea that again, I'm being forced to take this seriously. I would be very happy to say, poor David Hogg, man, his friends got killed. I get it. He's upset. My children would be upset. I would be upset. But the left is forcing me to listen carefully to what he says because it could become the law I have to abide by. For instance, this is in the manifesto from Parkland Kids. It said there ought to be a database of which guns are sold in the United States. That ought to be paired to the status of the owner's mental health. Privacy laws should be amended. So they're saying, this march is saying, that HIPAA laws should be suspended and the U.S. government ought to keep your medical records. The public doesn't support that. Nobody supports that.
I don't know quite what that is talking about.
You want me to read it to you again? To do so, privacy laws should be amended. That a database of all guns sold in the United States ought to be paired with a database of the gun owner's mental health and physical capability.
I think what he's probably saying is that if you are actually found to be mentally unstable by a judge, that ought to be relevant to whether or not you can buy a gun.
That's already the law, as you know. That is already the law. If you're adjudicated mentally ill, it's on the form, it's in the FBI background check. I've purchased guns and filled that out, so has everyone who's done it in this country. So that already exists. Look, I agree that there needs to be a stricter standard that keeps crazy people from getting guns. I totally agree. But to act as this march does, that if only we had the will to overcome the NRA, it's easy, we could fix it, is a lie. It's a total lie. This is complicated stuff.
Yeah, but if you take a look at, I've only taken a little bit of a look at their manifesto, but it lists like 10 or 15 different things that we ought to be doing. It's not just about one thing. And I think that's a fact. Look, there is no one legal change that's going to stop mass shootings from happening tomorrow, or that's going to stop 100 people from being killed at the barrel of a gun every day in this country. But there's a lot of things that we could be doing differently, and I think you have to concede what we're doing right now isn't working.
True, and I'm just very concerned that all this energy and the money from all these various billionaires is not making it better. It's focused instead on taking the rights away of people who didn't do anything wrong, like me, and like all of middle America, whom they hate, obviously. And there's no emphasis at all on, for example, the 4 cops with guns who stood by while 17 people were murdered. Why are they never mentioned? I'm a little confused. Talk about a failure of authorities. Where are their names here?
Look, I've heard them talked about plenty, and they all did.
Really?
Then they all did the wrong thing. Yeah, the last time I was on Fox News, we talked about that.
No, but it's a serious thing. So the NRA didn't shoot anybody. You probably don't like the NRA, but they're almost overwhelming law-abiding people. They didn't shoot a single person. These police officers, deputies, stood by and allowed this murder to take place, and yet they're getting a complete pass. Why?
Look, I don't know whether they're getting a pass or not. That's up to the people of Florida, and I hope those people aren't police deputies anymore.
No. It's up to the people running the march to set the emphasis here. Something terrible just happened. There are a lot of lessons from it, and that lesson has been buried intentionally because it doesn't entail taking away the Second Amendment rights of the innocent.
Yeah, but I think what they're saying is these mass shootings keep happening. 100 people keep getting shot every day who shouldn't be shot and have the right to, life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. What we're doing right now isn't working. Here's a list of 10 or 15 things that we are going to advocate for that we think should make a difference. There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people out there on the mall tomorrow, many of whom aren't students, who have said things you disagree with, who think that what we do isn't working. Here are the things that we should be doing.
Do we as people who seek to influence public policy have an obligation to think through what we advocate for, to learn about it,
Sure.
to consult the reams of social science that has been conducted on this subject before we advocate for something? Or is it enough to say, I feel upset, do something?
No, look, I think there is nothing unusual and a lot of things that are right about students who had a horrible experience, who believe that we should be doing things differently, coming to Washington and leading a bunch of other like-minded people, like 70% of the public.
But why doesn't someone tell this kid you're not allowed to accuse people who disagree with you of advocating for murder? That's an awful thing to say.
Well, you're saying.
But why aren't you? You're the one. I mean, he's doing a dozen interviews a day, and nobody has the courage to say, son, I'm sorry, I know you're upset, but you're not allowed to accuse people of wanting to kill children unless you can prove it.
Look, I think he was mad at the governor of his state for not doing enough. And you know what? Governor Rick Scott didn't do enough. Although I have to say, I'm kind of a fan of Rick Scott because he never met a gun or an NRA extremist he didn't like. And even he bucked the NRA because what they don't want us to do is so ridiculous.
Well, I think Rick Scott is a buffoon. That's my view. But it doesn't make me, and I do think that, but it doesn't make me any less appalled by the killing. And I hope that you and everyone else who seeks to reduce the power of the Second Amendment would at least acknowledge that I care as much about kids as anybody else does. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Look, I absolutely believe that when Congress actually agrees to have a debate about this, they will go to their committees, they will go to the floor, and they will have a reasoned debate where they talk about the social science evidence about what works and what doesn't.
I hope so, and I hope it won't be dismissed as NRA lobbying, because I think these are real questions. Like, we need to reach adult conclusions.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're the only one who comes on. I definitely appreciate that. The media have had a lot of fun pushing unproved claims between Trump and Russia. Okay, now here's another angle that you may not have seen. Claims the NRA has been penetrated by the Russians somehow as well. Kim Strassel is on the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and she joins us tonight. I almost can't keep up with the various things the left doesn't like that they're claiming have been penetrated by Russia. But unpack this nutty conspiracy theory for us, if you would.
Well, what's important about this one, Tucker, is it's by the very same people, it would appear, that brought us the dossier claims as well. So you remember, the Clinton campaign hires this Fusion GPS to commission the dossier. It comes up with these fantastical dossier claims, and what's it do? It goes to the FBI in order to give them some legitimacy, even though nothing in it has been corroborated, nothing's been proved. And then once the FBI said it was doing an investigation, then everyone took it seriously. So now what we have is same people, Fusion GPS, that have been peddling to the House Intelligence Committee and others their argument, Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion GPS, that the NRA has, quote, been infiltrated by the Russians, their top leadership, and that Russians have been filtering money through the NRA and did during 2016 to help Trump. Now, he has no evidence for this, and yet we see the media running after it, and suddenly lots of stories making this claim without a shred of evidence.
Has anybody, I mean, there are some very smart people on the left and some of them who are self-aware. Has anyone said, well, maybe this is mass hysteria? If everything we don't like, every popular movement we disagree with, if our instinct is to blame unseen saboteurs from Russia, maybe we're crazy. Has anybody said that?
Nope, not that I have heard of, because as you know and I know, there is such an interest right now on Russia somehow connecting it to the Trump campaign, suggesting there are nefarious things happening around every corner. And this is just very concerning because, look, there is not one jot of evidence to this, all right? Glenn Simpson said this in testimony. He mentioned some random Russians' names. He could provide no evidence of money transfers, of any person's name in the NRA who supposedly took it. And yet you have newspaper outlets like McClatchy who continue to run newspaper articles giving credence to this. So how does the NRA, it has flatly denied it. Anyone involved with this has flatly denied it. But apparently all you have to do these days is come up with a conspiracy, have House Democrats give it credence, and then suddenly it's legitimate.
Our leaders are out of control. Emotionally, they're out of control. They're children. I'm saying it's scary, actually. It's having a big effect. Kim, thank you for explaining that to us. I appreciate your sober voice in the middle of a non-sober time. Dan Bongino is an NRA TV contributor. He's a former Secret Service agent, knows a lot about firearms, and he joins us tonight. Dan, it's good to see you. So you hesitate even to do a segment like this or a show like this because so strong is the social sanction against anybody who asks sober questions about what these kids are calling for. But is there anything, given that you have heard this march advocate for that you think sincerely would reduce school shootings or gun violence?
No, Tucker, and I'm being candid with you. I haven't. I have not heard that. I mean, I know from my experience in law enforcement that criminals don't give a rat's behind about gun laws. They just don't care. A matter of fact, gun laws are one of the few laws that put a perimeter around the fence of law-abiding people but do nothing to put a perimeter around the behavior of the non-law-abiding, the criminal, because they just don't care. They get the guns on the street. And I think we saw in Maryland recently, the only thing that's going to stop a person committed with evil in his heart to doing chaos, death, and destruction is a good guy, in fact, trained with a firearm.
I wonder, so there are going to be a lot of well-known, powerful, affluent people at tomorrow's march morally on display, like peacocks. If they really believe that guns are the problem, I wonder how many of them will bring armed bodyguards with them. And shouldn't a prerequisite of this conversation be, if you're going to advocate for gun control, you live by those standards? Why don't they, I wonder?
Because, Tucker, we're not involved in a war of facts and data and reason arguments anymore. We're involved right now, we're knee-deep in gaslighting. Gaslighting is what the media has been doing to us in conjunction with their liberal buddies and their acolytes for a long time. It's the idea that if you repeat a lie often enough, you repeat it confidently, and you isolate people from the truth, that lie will in fact become an alternate reality. We start with the Trump collusion that nobody can produce a scintilla of evidence, but Tucker, I guarantee you, if you were to take a poll of Americans, especially liberals, probably 50% or more think it actually happened. The same thing goes for the narrative that the media wants to propagate now. The media is guns are bad, guns are the sole problem. The human being and the evil in the human heart that's existed for as long as we've been around is a non-issue. Let's not focus on that. And whatever they have to do to isolate you from the truth, simple facts like gun ownership's gone up in the United States, gun violence has gone down, that's just a simple way to do a simple correlation, and that's left out of the argument entirely because it doesn't fit the media's pre-existing worldview.
What would happen if these people, the left, right now, in their current state of mind, if they took power, if they had the White House in both chambers of the Congress?
Tucker, it's pretty terrifying. I mean, I have to be candid with you. They don't really stand for anything, the left, other than the acquisition of power. I mean, they can't even stick with a coherent narrative. You know, I was chatting with someone earlier, and I said to them, you know, it's fascinating how they put so much credence into these kids marching tomorrow, and thank God they're out there doing it. Good for you. I celebrate your big R right to assemble and free speech. But the same victims of crime who are victims of terror, the angel parents who've lost kids to illegal immigrants, do you notice how the media seems to sideline their voice? They can't even stay consistent on the narrative. These people frighten me because, Tucker, they have no lodestar. And when you don't have principles guiding you and nothing's objective and everything is subjective, that gets really rough. The whole idea of the Bill of Rights was to prevent that.
So I mean, this is a question I ask myself a lot. Do you think that the rest of us make a mistake by acting as if this is a rational debate, that we can win people over and here are the facts and I've thought a lot about this and here's my position on it? Maybe we're talking to people who literally don't care what we say or what the facts are or what conclusion reason leads us to. They just want power and they're not really interested in debating. Do you ever think that?
Yeah, they're not interested in debating, Tucker. Go back and YouTube liberal comments on an issue, and they've taken opposite positions on the same issue in an effort to get votes, to go away and minimize the individual and empower themselves later. Dangerous stuff.
God, I spent my whole life doing this. I hope it adds up to something. I hope that someone can be won over. It's not just
me too, brother.
Blowing in the wind. Dan, thank you.